Didn't number this list. I think I'm finally ready. Hey, I'm Moxie, and I'm back for video number 4. So this is going to be video number 1 in a... Kuma. My dog is going nuts. This is going to be video number 1 in a 3-part series, just kind of talking about video games, one of my favorite subjects. This is part of my effort to show that trans people are more than just trans. I'm also a giant nerd. Unfortunately, I'm the obsessive yet easily distracted kind, not the smart kind. Can't even read my own handwriting. So I want to preface this list with, obviously, it's an opinion. My favorite games might not be your favorites. That doesn't mean that you're wrong or I'm wrong, it just means we like different kinds of games. So number 10 on my list is going to be Fable, the first one, and I guess the Lost Chapters, which is technically still the first one. Fable was one of the first games that I ever played where your choices influence the world around you. I'm not sure if it's the first game that was ever like that, but it was the first one that I played. I thought it was so cool that you could play as a good character or an evil character, and that it affected not only the way that your character looked, but how people interacted with your character. Although I will say that a lot of the interactions are very bizarre and awkward. I'm not sure if that was their intent or not. If you play as an evil character, it's hilarious how a guy will stand in a store and just scream at you over and over while still selling you stuff. It's amazing. That's game design at its finest. There are so many squirrels outside. I wanted to put Fable on the list because when I was a kid, it meant a lot to me to play a game that had so much non-linear stuff that you could do that had nothing to do with the story. That was so cool to me. There's plenty not to like about Fable, I think that's fair to say. But the legendary weapons were awesome. I liked how much non-linear stuff there was to do in the game. Being able to make money by like buying and renting stuff, that was kind of interesting. I don't really care for just like senselessly grinding for money, even though that's going to seem really contradictory later when we get to the top of the list. And there's plenty of comic value in Fable. I still laugh when I play it. And so I really felt like it deserved a place on my list. I feel like I didn't really do justice to that. So number 9 on my list is going to be Gauntlet Legends for the Nintendo 64. They've also made a remake of it called Dark Legacy for the GameCube, which is also good, but I personally don't like it as much. Gauntlet Legends is a lot like the original Gauntlet in that you and up to 3 of your friends get together and you go around beating up monsters. It's really kind of straightforward. This game takes me way back. Like, I'm talking 3 or 4 watching my uncles play it. I've actually played most of the Gauntlet games that are out there. I really enjoy this one the best. There's such a wide variety of items, and each of the levels feels very different. It's still one of my favorite party games to play with friends when I have them over. I mostly like games with a lot of depth. Gauntlet Legends really is kind of a break from that, honestly. Hey, Jack. A lot of the games that I really like to play, especially now, aren't the kind of games that you can really sit someone down and show them how to play in 5 minutes. When I play a cooperative game with my friends, I don't want to have to sit there for, 2 hours and have to show them how to play. I feel like the game's very straightforward and yet very satisfying to play. Easily my favorite kind of beat 'em up style game. Number 8 for me is going to have to be Fire Emblem. The Sacred Stones. The Sacred Stones is my favorite one. This is another game that came out when I was a kid, and I still enjoy it. I love strategy games. Turn-based strategy holds a special place in my heart because I'm a huge Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder nerd. So in this game, you kind of follow the story of a prince and a princess as they try to rescue their homeland from destruction and save the world. The combat system is pretty in-depth, at least that's how I felt when I was a kid. You've got a ton of different kinds of units, especially in Sacred Stones. You've got swords, spears, bows, axes, 4 or 5 different kinds of magic, dragons. You really choose how those characters advance later on, as well as which characters you want to use in each fight. I think this gives the game a good amount of replay value. I've played through a couple different times, kind of trying out different unit compositions to kind of see which characters I like the best. There's a good amount of endgame content in Sacred Stones as well. When you beat the main story, there are these towers where you can go, and you can fight like wave after wave of monster in several levels, and you can unlock kind of like secret characters that you can use. When you link your Game Boy Advance up with another one, you can duel using those secret characters in addition to the ones you got from the story. Really cool. The only flaw I would say that those games have is that the AI can start to become very predictable after you've played. The hard difficulty really just does not feel very challenging. If you beat the game on normal, you can easily beat the game on hard. You just have to choose your units a little more optimally. Number 7. We're getting up in the list. Age of Empires 2. Like Age of Kings and the Conqueror's expansion. A few years ago, they actually made an HD remake of this game, and since then have actually released multiple updates and extra content. If you didn't know that, but you liked this game back then, you're gonna love it now. They just added so much cool stuff. So this was really one of the first real-time strategy games that I ever played. I remember going to my Nana and Papa's house and getting on their dial-up internet to play with people that I'd never met before online. I also remember getting kicked off those games when someone had to make a phone call. So this game is really what has ruined my life. I love real-time strategy games. This isn't the only one on the list. One of the coolest things about Age of Empires is that there aren't really as many restrictions as there are in a lot of other real-time strategy games. You can build stuff anywhere in Age of Empires. If you want to build a town center right next to your enemy's town center, that's a terrible decision, but you can do it. This leads to a huge variety in strategies for how to win. I really think that that is the lifeblood of a real-time strategy game, is constantly finding new ways to outfox your opponent. If you've played games like Civilization, Age of Empires is kind of like that, except there are no turns. There's definitely a bigger focus on fighting in Age of Empires. It's really one of the only ways that you can win. Besides wonder creation, the only thing I really don't like about Age of Empires 2, your unit variety is very narrow. Like, every civilization has certain units they can build and they can't build, and every civilization has a unique unit. Most of these units kind of feel the same functionally. The fact that you share most of the units in your army with the other civilizations, that's like a personal preference thing, I guess. It's definitely not something that's ever kept me away from Age of Empires 2. I still play it regularly, and now I don't have to worry about being knocked off the modem. The online community around that game still very strong. I definitely recommend that if you like competitive games, this is one to check out. So number 6 is going to be The Elder Scrolls 4, aka Oblivion. I played it for the computer. I feel like the Elder Scrolls fan base is very divided between Morrowind or Skyrim being the best one. I like them all. For me, it was Oblivion. Really showed me like how detailed a world can be. I loved like being able to go and just read all of the books. The amount of just written text that you can just read about the world in the game is amazing. The storylines in Oblivion are all great. I loved the Mages Guild, Fighters Guild, Thieves Guild, Dark Brotherhood, Shivering Isles, Knights of the Nine. Honestly, I think they worked so much on that other stuff that they forgot to make the main story interesting. I really think that kind of works to Oblivion's advantage because it makes you want to explore the world, which is really what the Elder Scrolls games, in my opinion, are all about. The first character I made in Oblivion had an obsession with alchemy, and I made her get one of every alchemical ingredient in the game and then have it as a collection in her house. It's an RPG that's so big that you can get lost in the open world content. Every time you turn a corner, there's a new dungeon to explore, there's a new town that you didn't know about. There's so much stuff to do. Fast traveling just kind of sucks all the fun out of the game for me. You'll miss so much stuff if you just hop from town to town instead of exploring. Go and see these breathtaking landscapes that are just hidden in this little corner of the map that you have no story reason to go to. Number 5 is going to be Tales of Symphonia for the GameCube. They've also remastered it for the PS3. It's really one of the best JRPGs I've ever played. The characters are all interesting. The story is interesting. The game is long. I mean, it's got 2 of those tiny little GameCube discs. I mean, the first time I played through it, it took me like 60, 70 hours to beat it. I mean, a lot of time can be trimmed off that. But there's actually a lot of non-linear stuff you can do in the game. The game plays a lot like other JRPGs, where, you know, you're like a 200-foot tall giant on the overworld map, stomping your way from city to city, and you fight monsters in between that, and then you have to go through dungeons to get things. It's all very basic in that sense. But what really knocks it out of the park for me is the fighting system. When you encounter an enemy and the fight scene breaks out, you control your characters in real time, and you can kind of give your other NPCs commands unless you have other players to play with you. Up to 4 people can play. There's a huge amount of replay value just to kind of play the game through with everybody and play as each character. I've beat the game over a dozen times. The game has a lot of almost like Shonen Jump anime style humor. You know, that's something that I've sort of grown out of, but it's still enjoyable. There's a big flaw with the game though, and that is with the multiplayer mode, the camera always focuses on what player 1 is fighting. That means if you're like a melee fighter and you're player 2 and you're focusing on a different enemy than player 1, you're not going to be able to see what you're doing half the time. Though I will say that they fixed that problem to some extent in the remastered version for the PS3. I'm starting to run out of games. I'm worried because as we get closer and closer to the top, I know it's going to get more and more controversial. So, number 4 is Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask for the N64. This is a Zelda game I don't see on a lot of people's favorite list, which honestly shocks me because it's easily my favorite one. If I owned a Nintendo Switch, I would probably say Breath of the Wild, though. Japan is kicking ass with the open world thing. All of their open world games recently have been awesome. That's why I think that Majora's Mask is so good. It existed in a time before there were a lot of really, really solid open world games. Majora's Mask, to me, has so much replay value. You're given 3 days to stop the world from ending, more or less. And you're also given the ability to manipulate time, so you basically have an infinite amount of time to fix it. Each day in those 3 days is different. Different things happen. The NPCs have their own schedules. Every NPC that you can meaningfully interact with has a whole story that you can follow, and you can watch all of their stories unfold, as well as get rewarded for helping them out. I personally felt like the dungeons in Majora's Mask actually had really interesting puzzle elements to them. This added with the fact that there's so much stuff to do outside of just going and beating the main story is why I really feel like it is one of the better Zelda games. And I feel that's why when I played Breath of the Wild at my little brother's, it blew my mind because I was like, oh man, there's so much other stuff to do. It's like Majora's Mask. They need to bring the Zora link from Majora's Mask into Breath of the Wild so that everyone's weird fanfiction with the shark guy is even better. The flaw I want to point out in Majora's Mask is a flaw in Zelda games in general. It's that bosses are just easy. There's one thing you're waiting for to happen in every boss battle. There's just one thing that has to happen that prompts you to act, and that's the only time that you can effectively deal damage. You do that 2 or 3 times, you're done. Honestly, this was the hardest part of the list, was trying to kind of decide which one was 3, which one was 2, and which one was 1. But I feel like I've got it. So number 3 is going to be Dwarf Fortress. You know in the Matrix when those guys are looking at the lines of code just going down? That's kind of what Dwarf Fortress is like. And at first glance kind of just seems weird and boring. But Dwarf Fortress is easily the most complicated game I've ever played. I don't even know where to start. There's so much to do. You start with 7 dwarves. Your goal is to build a fortress and basically see how long you can last. To complicate that, Every dwarf in your society has its own personality. They have their own likes, their own dislikes, their own relationships with other dwarves. The combat system is incredibly detailed. When your dwarves fight, they're gonna get hurt. We're not just talking HP damage, we're talking wounded organs, blood loss, broken bones, and then they're gonna have to go rest in a bed or have a hospital if you've built one. Then you've got to have a soap maker to make soap for your hospital. You've got to have doctors, you've got to have surgeons, you've got to have you got to have carpenters, you've got to have masons, you've got to have mechanics, you've got to have weapon makers, you got to have blacksmiths, you got to have armor smiths, you got to have craftsmen of all different kinds, you have to have jewelers, you have to have hunters, you have to have farmers, you have to have fishers, you have to have cloth weavers. There's so much stuff that you have to implement to have like a smoothly running society. It's bonkers. The fact that this is made by two guys that just live off people's donations is even further mind-boggling. The game actually has a place in the New York Museum of Modern Art where it rightfully belongs. The meticulous detail of this game, which is constantly being updated for free. Those two guys have a serious dedication to their craft, and I personally think that they are the greatest game makers of all time, even though their game is not my favorite game. The thing that makes Dwarf Fortress so amazing is also its downfall, in that the game is so complicated that most people won't try it. You have to have a losing is fun mentality to play Dwarf Fortress. Every time you lose, it's a learning experience. Because everything is just kind of procedurally generated in Dwarf Fortress, it means that every time you play, you're having a unique experience that no one has had quite the same way that you have. You really, really need to try it. It is so much fun. Number 2 is RuneScape. I know you're saying, hey, that screenshot's not RuneScape. Yes, it is. That's RuneScape next we're looking at. So, RuneScape is a game I played a lot as a kid, and then stopped playing, and then have recently gotten back into it, and I'm really astonished at how much they've done to, like, update the game and keep it current. That game, it looks good. It looks good. It's fun. They've taken a lot of stuff that really pushed me away from RuneScape, the kind of, like, endless just, like, click and just wait for things to happen. The combat system is a lot more interesting. It's still very simple. They have added some depth to it, which has created quite a schism in the RuneScape community. I like it. They've made stuff somewhat less grindy. They've given you a lot of ways to increase the amount of experience you get when you're training skills so that it doesn't take so long to get to those high levels. They're also constantly adding quests. Quests are one of the things that RuneScape has gotten so good that no other MMO has gotten right. Every quest in RuneScape is a unique part of its story that really is engaging. There's no go here, kill 20 of these and come back. That's a skill in itself. That's called Slayer. That doesn't cut it for a quest in RuneScape. Sometimes you get like a rare item that you can only get from completing the quest. Sometimes you get experience in a lot of different skills instead of just combat. Sometimes you get access to new areas that you couldn't access before. This is a game I still play almost every day, and I'm happy to say that my little brother and my little sister are now playing with me. They're not that little, they're adults. They're more grown up than I am. We've been playing almost every day now, and it's been a blast. There's so much stuff to do in RuneScape. There's, even just without the quests, there's so many mini games. I've played whole games with less content than some of these mini games alone. They have out of mini game rewards for your character for playing them. It's so cool. If you're looking for a time sink, there's nothing like RuneScape. There's always something to do on RuneScape. There's plenty of stuff to do as a free player, and if you pay the monthly fee to be a member, you're never gonna run out of stuff to do. Alright, number 1. Number 1 for me is StarCraft Brood War. I know I told you before that I liked RTSs and that Age of Empires wasn't the only one on here. This game has been with me pretty much my entire life. I found out about StarCraft when Brood War came out, and I've basically been playing it ever since then. My skill level doesn't show it, but I don't really have much of an addictive personality, except for StarCraft. I don't know what it is about StarCraft, but it is so compelling. Nowadays, I actually play a lot of StarCraft 2. I'm really looking to switch back because this summer, they're coming out with a digital remaster. Hands down, I really think that StarCraft Brood War is the best game. I love competitive games where you can pit your brain against another person. Training yourself to think faster and react faster is a great real life skill you can take outside of StarCraft and use in your personal life. Each of the races handles differently. Terran, Zerg, Protoss, they all feel very different, and they have their own types of units. They have their own play styles. It almost feels like a different game with each race. The amount of skill and knowledge it takes to be good at StarCraft is astounding. I think that's why it scares a lot of people away. I'm by no means good at StarCraft, but I sure like it. The better you get at the game, the more impressive stunts you can pull off in the game. It's a game where when you put the practice in, you can become phenomenal at it, to a point that most people can only dream of being at. It's a fantasy of mine to one day be a grandmaster in StarCraft. If you like one-on-one competitive games, I really feel that you're grossly missing out if you don't play StarCraft Brood War. There's just some like shallow dives into the games that I like. I know I probably didn't do an amazing job of describing them. I just wanted to sort of go over the games I like and why I like them. I hope this provides a little bit of insight into the kind of person that I am and the kind of things that I like to do. It was actually really fun for me to sit here and make this video and just kind of nerd out about the games I like. I'd like to do a video more on like games that are disappointing to me, even though I might still like them or think that they're good games. That's something I could do. So anyway, that should be coming out in the next couple days. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope that you'll be back for the next one. Fun tip, every second that you're playing a video game is a second you're not looking in a mirror and seeing that you're getting old.